better continue, because otherwise that would be a bit of a crisis, wouldn't it?
Okay, welcome everyone to Open Repositories 2021 session 9. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. My name is Dimity Flanagan. I will be your moderator for the session 9. I am based at the University of Melbourne, and for that reason, I would like to start this session with an acknowledgement of country. So I would like to begin by acknowledging the many unceded lands in which we are meeting on today. I myself am on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. So we have a great session, 3 presentations lined up today. I will put the code of conduct in the chat. It is also there on the screen. If you do have any concerns, the website will tell you how to lodge those with the conference committee. We also have a shared Google Doc, which I will circulate. For those who watch this on a recording, if we can't answer any of the questions live, or if they're answered by text in the Q&A, we will put those into the shared doc so that you can view them at a later date. Just a reminder, of course, that this session is recorded and the recordings will be put up on Zenodo when they become available. So because we have a packed agenda, I will throw straight to the first presentation. Just stop sharing my screen. If I can get rid of the, there we go. Okay, so our first presentation today is by Adam Vials-Moore, Sally Rumsey, and James Kerwin, if he does get to join us. And their presentation is Plan S and repository PIDs. And they are representing today Jisc, Coalition S, and the University of Liverpool. I will hand over to Adam now.
Hi, and good morning, afternoon, evening, time zone appropriate greeting to you all. So I'm going to just do a brief introduction, then Sally's going to talk over the kind of start of our presentation, then I'm going to take over. James, if we can find him, will talk something about the technical aspects, or otherwise I can do that. Then I'm going to wrap up. So let's just try and get this thing full screen and started. Okay, is that all right for everyone? Bit of a nod. Yeah, thanks, Sally. Okay, so this is a talk about Plan S and repository persistent identifiers. Thanks for the introduction, Dimity. And now I'm going to hand over to Sally to say why we're talking about these things with next slide.
Thanks, Adam. A bit of background. Coalition S is a group of national and charitable research funders and research organisations with a common aim. Organisations include the Research Council of Norway, Agence Nationale de Recherche in France, the South African Medical Research Council Wellcome Trust, World Health Organization, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, European Commission, and most recently, the Fonds de Recherche de Québec in Canada. The funders agree that articles resulting from their funded research should be available open access immediately, that is, with no embargo and released under a public license. The reasoning behind this is not administrative compliance box ticking, it's to enable the widest possible distribution of and access to research findings for the benefit of researchers, and society in general. Now, this cannot be stressed enough. To put this aim into effect, Coalition S created 10 principles that it titled Plan S. All Coalition S organisations are currently working on implementing Plan S. Now, Plan S includes 3 routes to open access that meets the funder's aims. Articles should be openly available via an open access journal or platform, a journal that falls under a transition arrangement towards full open access, or the most relevant to this talk, via a repository. Any of these 3 routes can fulfill the overarching aim of the funders, that is, immediate open access under a Creative Commons attribution license. For the purpose of this presentation, oh, next slide, please, Adam.
There you go.
For the purpose of this presentation, we are focusing on the form of the article that's available via repository. This could be an open access version as published by a publisher, sometimes called the version of record. However, today we are focusing on the other version commonly found in a repository, the author accepted manuscript, or AAM. As it says in this definition here, this is the version of the article. Hang on. That's the wrong slide, I think. But anyway, this is the version of the article. Yeah, that's the one. The version of the article commonly found in a repository, the author's accepted manuscript, or AAM. It says in this definition, the version of the article that's been peer reviewed and accepted for publication and includes changes made by the author during the peer review process. It's sometimes called a postprint, but we're going to stick to the author's accepted manuscript, or AAM, today. Thanks, Adam. Plan S repository route includes deposit in either an institutional or subject repository. Accepted manuscripts are of critical importance as versions of articles owned by the authors that wrote them, and as works that allow free access to research findings for all. Now, Coalition S strongly believes that the accepted manuscript should be owned by the author. This view is welcomed by numerous researchers, including early career researchers such as the Marie Curie alumni. If you haven't already read it, see the joint statement issued last month by CESAR, the European Universities Association, and Science Europe. So looking ahead, as an increasingly fragmented mosaic of different research finding outputs emerges, and dissemination and scholarly discourse tools and services to support this model evolves, we're going to see more registered reports, micro-publications, overlay peer review, and wider use of preprints. Now, repositories contribute to this canvas and continued innovation in this space. It's therefore important that accepted manuscripts in repositories are handled as significant digital objects with robust identifiers. Thanks, Adam. And to this end, Plan S includes technical requirements for repositories. The requirements encourage adoption of high standards for repositories, for example, for metadata. Now here, Coalition S is in alignment with CORE, the Confederation of Open Access Repositories, on the importance of repositories and high technical standards. Particularly pertinent to this presentation is that Coalition S is not prescriptive in the implementation details of technical standards for repositories. That's left to the community and those best placed to make those decisions. So before handing over to Adam, I'd just like to add that Coalition S welcomes the imminent release of Jisc's open door repository assessment feature, which also aims to promote high standards and quality of repositories. And at that point, I'll hand over to Adam for more of the technical background.
Hi, thanks very much, Sally. At this point, I'd just like to remind everyone that the repository's place within the open access workflows is a complex one. And I'm just going to leave that there. So persistent identifiers, a brief reminder, because I think it's important that we remember that it's not just about the fact that we have these digital objects, but that also behind them there is something that both means that they are a guaranteed object that lasts and is long lasting. So there is an organization, so doi.org has something behind it that says it will be there for a while, right? There is this uniqueness about it in the identifier itself, but also equally importantly, there is the metadata underpinning all of this. In repositories themselves, we have a wide range of metadata, people who are involved, the works, and that's what we're going to focus on here. Organizations, funding, the Crossref funding ID and the funder registry, and the projects as well. I've got another talk in an hour if people want to hear some more about this. In repositories themselves, you can, of course, create identifiers. So for new works and works under the controller repository, and especially for those works that are deposited, as Sally has mentioned in those technical requirements. And you can see we get a wide variety of interactions in this space between those different persistent identifiers. I should just say PIDs, shouldn't I? And just to point here that over the last couple of years, we've talked about a grant ID, a grant identifier, funding registry. Really, it's just a DOI as part of the Crossref funder registry. I just wanted to make that a point. It's almost as if Crossref have asked me to specifically point that out. Right, what are we specifically talking about here? Well, I think one of the things that we want to consider, and I'll leave this for you to think about while we move on next to James, who's here. Hi, James. Talking about some of the actual technical considerations for implementing persistent identifiers for author accepted manuscripts inside repositories. That's a great idea. However, there are some issues around the fact that author accepted manuscripts deposited in a repository brings some additional issues to the scholarly landscape and infrastructure. So in general, you'd have a repository, you'd have your author accepted manuscript, you'd issue an identifier for it, you'd also have your journal, whatever platform, and a version of record. Fab. Now, if you've got authors at more than one institution and all of your institutions have a Green OA root repository, then you also get, other author accepted manuscripts in other repositories. So that's something to think about. We might have preprints. So as Sally said, we have preprints, postprints, or author accepted manuscripts, and the journal. Now, all of these things would also be uniquely identified. So there are PIDs for all of these things. So these are all parts of a work, parts of the narrative journey of a work, all with PIDs and all parts of the same work. I'm going to talk in a bit about some of the ways that we might think about this. But before we do that, I'd like to hand over to James to talk about the first of these, which is thinking about a repository with an author accepted manuscript in it. James.
Hello, sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm just going to discuss our experience considering which PID format to implement in the repository. So at Liverpool, we've investigated 3 different types. We've looked at the URI, handle.net, and DOIs. Each one, depending on your outlook, meets the requirements of a persistence identifier, but there are many different reasons why you might choose one over the other. And this list isn't particularly exhaustive in terms of examples or reasons why you would or wouldn't choose them. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the repository URI, it's URI, URL, and URN are all very similar and all technically different to each other, but fundamentally it looks like a link that you type in your address bar. An obvious pro of URIs from an ePrints repository is that it already exists, so there's no additional time or very little additional time, effort, or work required to utilize it. Another pro is that obviously it uniquely identifies things. It's built based upon the ePrint ID, and that is unique in itself. And it's persistent-ish over time. So if you don't change your repository domain or the URL, the address, it will look pretty similar over time. And as an added bonus, but not necessarily a requirement, it's resolvable. So if you click on it, it will take you to the item, which is, I think, a reasonable expectation from users. Now, some cons are that the versioning isn't necessarily obvious in the appearance of the URI, but that could also be changed with a small amount of changing how ePrints works. And they're not necessarily persistent over time. Again, if you change the URL. So handle.net, you have full control, which is a bonus, and you allow your URL doesn't change over time. It looks the same, and you can alter the URL that's related to each handle. But some cons are that it's quite technically involved. So you need someone who knows Java and systems admin experience. And you need to consider if you would be able to replace that person if they left. And there's also issues around setting up a new server for handle.net to work. Thank you. Now, DOIs, we use them on the repository and data catalog. I find them to be the best option. They're quite user-friendly, so if you're not technically equipped, you can use the dashboard to do things. If you're slightly more technically equipped, you can use the API, which is really clear, really well documented, and just good. Similar to Handle, it allows existing links to persist unchanged, and they remain resolvable and can allow for versioning. There's also a DataSite plugin for ePrints, so if you choose that as your DOI provider, then good, it's there, it's ready. It's constantly being developed and improved with new schemas available, and it's a global registry, so you can search and discover items. It's another way for people to find your items in the repository. Some cons are that it's third party, so you hand over control to another organization, and you're also subject to schema changes, and who knows how long things like DataSite might exist. I mean, even mountains crumble into the ocean. And there's also a cost implication as well, but everything has a cost. So it's really up to you to decide what's suitable based on your resources and what you expect from any of these options. And yeah, I think we're going to go with DOIs at Liverpool.
Okay, thanks for that, James. Because we
are at time, so.
Okay, I'm just going to give 1 minute, if that's all right. I just wanted to briefly, in closing, talk about the implications that I asked you to think about before James talked. So with this multiplication in Greenaway, if we have in the Plan S world multiple AAMs in multiple repositories, then perhaps we should look at solutions based around infrastructure that we already have on aggregators such as Core. As a Jisc person, I of course will mention Core, where we could look at preprints, and version of records all aggregated together to have a narrative of the work. We can also look at solutions in the metadata. Again, maybe not cross-ref because the bigger publishers don't care, the smallers can't, but there might be room in the middle for, let's say, an alphabet, single letter and a 10 to the power 3 type person. Or you can, again, data sites. So James already mentioned DataSite DOIs, they're controlled by the repositories. They have relationships you can express in your metadata. We could express updates via aggregator repository or aggregator repository coordination. That means they can also go into the PID graphs that are being developed because those would be events. So then maybe for Open Repository Ideas Forum, people might be interested in looking at some of these things. I think this might be a really good way. Longer term, next-gen repositories, resource sync, some of these things might actually go away. So in summary, all of these things are important. The wider infrastructure ensures coordination, better discovery, better openness. That's where we want to get to. That's what Plan S should give us. I think the really important thing is persistent identifiers should ensure that your postprints, your authors accepted manuscripts are first-class citizens of open science, and that's where we want to get for greener way to make valid, open, accessible science. You know, making sure that you also have an awareness of kind of like these issues around trust, identity, persistence of the infrastructure that you're relying on. Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Adam, Sally, and James.
I should mention our
and
other co-author, Martin,
Yes.
who was not here for the presentation.
So that has eaten into question time. We do have some questions in the Q&A. I'd ask that you answer them in the Q&A function. Sure. If we have time at the end, then we can come back and have a long chat about DOIs. So I am now handing over to Tyng-Ruey Chuang, who is from Academia Sinica in Taiwan, and he is presenting today on behalf of himself and his co-authors, experience in moving toward an open repository for all, and luckily his co-authors will be available for the Q&A session. So I'll hand it over to you, Tyng-Ruey.
Thank you. I'm Tyng-Ruey Chuang. I will be presenting with my colleagues. We are from the Institute of Information Science, Academia Sinica, Taiwan. Dr. Yuhan Wang, an independent scholar and a collaborator in this research, is also joining us at this section. I will be presenting for the group, but they will join me at the Q&A sessions. I will make a brief introduction to the depositar, a research data repository we built. I will give a small tour on how it works, and then I will talk about the history of the depositar and our experience in running this data repository. We will also raise some issues for discussions. So here is an actual data set from the depositar on coral reef soundscape in Okinawa, Japan. On the left of the page, you will get is the data set at the depositar website. I will highlight some places for you to look at them. There are long descriptions about the data set and the project, and the data set will include multiple data files and the links to external resources. You can use text and the Wikidata keyword to annotate the data set. And the metadata come in three categories: basic information, spatial temporal information, and the management informations. There are license and the citation information attached to the data set. And there are machine readable data endpoint to access the data sets. So let's break into three parts. And on the top of the page, you see the title and the description of the data set. On the left, you see Ocean Biodiversity Listening Project, which is the project deposit this data set. A project can deposit as many data sets as it like. Here at the middle of the page, you see the data file and the link to external resource that together constitute the data set. The Explore button will take you to the file. On the left, there are license and citations information. Okay, this is the last part. You see tag and the Wikidata keyword for the data set. The data set's temporal resolution, time period, and the spatial coverage are described. There are management information so that you know whom to contact for the data. On the left, you see the spatial coverage. This is a map, as well as machine readable data endpoint. The depositor has a bilingual interface. And now I'm showing you the traditional Chinese interface for the same page. Please take a look at the Wikidata keyword. And here, you will see now it displays the Chinese label instead of the English label. So you will see two Chinese characters, 申请 for soundscape as a label of the first Wikidata keyword. Now I take you back to the English interface again, and you can see that the Wikidata keyword is back to soundscape. And we get this label in real time from Wikidata. Let's go back to the description of the data set. The creator of this data set provide also associate publication, which is in the Journal of Biological Conservation. This is a link, and he will bring you to the publisher's websites. You look at the paper, and you notice that in the data ability section, he says that the audio dataset used in preparing this paper are available from the authors, and the dataset is available on Depositar. The author provides a link. You click on the link, and you will find the dataset at the Depositar. So the dataset and the publication linked to each other. This is a wonderful mutual reference. You can also discover dataset at the Depositar by Google dataset search. You search for Rooryck soundscape, and you get 29 datasets in return. The dataset one, Okinawa, Japan, show up at the second place. And when you click on the Explore a Depositar button, and this will take you to the dataset at the Depositars. Currently, there are 130 projects using the Depositar now. In total, there are about 800 public datasets. The Depositar is an open repository for you to use. The website is at data.depositar.io. Now we turn to the part about our experience in running this open repository. We also raise a few issues for discussions. Why do we build this open repository? There's some history behind it. Starting in 2013, we received 2 grants from Taiwan's Ministry of Science and Technology on multidisciplinary area studies. There are joint projects where each project will include 5 or 5 teams. We are the only team with a background in information science. So we work on tool and the system so as to make it easier for the project member to share research data. Very early on, we decided to use CCAN to set up the data sharing system. We use CCAN because it has been used extensively by governments to set up open data protocols. CCAN is open source and written in Python. We like Pythons. And we repurpose CCAN so that it will not be used for publishing open data to the public. But instead, it will be used to share research data among project members. We have done lots of customizations. For example, we built in domain-specific keywords as a way to do a control vocabulary. We also extend the file preview function of CCAN, so it includes shapefile. Sinica to receive feedback. We are very fortunate to work in academia Sinica because we are rooted in a culture of open content, open data, and open source. So we pretty much set our own goal in exploring this space. At Open Repository 2015, actually, we have a poster describing our approach. As the Sinica project was running to an end, so we decided to open up the repository to the public for general use. Now anyone can deposit data sets. We launched the site at the Pacific Neighborhood Consortium Annual Conference, co-located with the Digital Heritage 2018 at San Francisco. There are lots of preparation to do for these reorientations. The first is email sign up and user authentications. So anyone with an email address can apply for an account. The site also has a new interface, and we improve the user menus. Later on, we add citation snippets, and we use Wikidata for system-wide keywords. Since the new launch in October 2018, there are a few updates of the service. With the help from Dr. Yuhuang Wang, several nonprofit organizations start to use the service to deposit and to disseminate data set about ecological impact assessment. We are also in dialogue with government agencies about using the service to share public sector information. Very fortunately, we received another grant from Taiwan's Ministry of Science and Technology. The focus on new grant is on research data management, about fostering a culture of practicing good research data management. The depositar will be part of the big picture. As a researcher need service they can trust and they like before they can deposit their data sets. But still we need more active users. Our experience in building open repository is very encouraging. We are happy to build on top of the open libre infrastructure. In fact, we think that's the only way to go. CCAN is open source. It's licensed under HGPL 3.0, which means the new code we add to CCAN, like a depositar, must be released to the public for the general public to reuse. We have contributed all our extension back to the upstream CCAN developers. This extension has been incorporated into new release of the software. In a way, this also protects our users because they can run an instance of their own with all the functionality of the depositar if they like. They can host their own data sets. We also see that CC license, web standard, and the Wikidata are important infrastructure to build upon. Our experience also suggests that we should be prepared to accept diverse user communities. Communities such as nonprofit organizations and government agencies, which are not traditional academics. They have different needs and expectations. Oftentimes, we will discuss whether to set up a new instance to serve the needs of a particular user communities. We have decided not to do so. And we encourage the user just to use the depositar because maintaining multiple instances will increase our own responsibilities. Currently, the quality of data set and the layer metadata at the depositar is issues. The quality is unbalanced, and we are looking for a method to address this. We also encourage the use of common vocabulary, such as TCAT, for publishing a data catalog, so that the data set can be properly indexed and discovered, just like a Google dataset search. And we need to formalize the data type of metadata as well. This will allow for proper data validations and interoperability. Therefore, they will improve data quality and the reuse. Now we come to the last slide, and I list several issues for discussions. We come to the community of data repository from a different path. We are two developers, and we build systems. Software tools by themselves do not keep data. But from software tools, we can build systems, build information systems, which can process and keep our own data. But when we move from system to service, we are processing and keeping other people's data. Now, this is increase our responsibility. To keep the service running and to preserve people's data sets is sustainability issues we are learning to cope with. On the one hand, we can aim to keep the service running forever, but we need to look for resources in order to do that. The other viewpoint is just preserve user data set, but not necessarily at the service we run.
2 minutes.
And that's the direction we are looking into as well. I think collaboration with other long-running data communities is very important. For example, we are looking into using ARK, archival resource key, as a way to issue PID for dataset. And this echo to the previous presentation on handle.net. Similar approach. We are now ARK lane assigning authority numbers and we plan to provide some service later this year. There are opportunity for two-way enrichment between data repository and the Wikidata as well. We currently use Wikidata as the source of the keywords, but we can contribute metadata from depositar to Wikidata as well. This concludes my presentation. Thank you. The depositar website is data.depositar.io. Please check it out. Please send us email as well. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Tyng-Ruey. That was really interesting. Sorry, I'm echoing on myself. So we do have a question in the Q&A. So I will, oh, it's gone into answered. Now I need to find it. Perhaps, yes, one of your colleagues has already answered it, but perhaps you'd like to comment live. The question was, how does the Wikidata keywords work? How is it integrated? Does it link back to Wikidata?
Wikidata has an API allow you to query by terms for identifier like key, and they can return the link to the item, as well as label in multiple language. So we just use the API. But if we consider dataset depositar also it's an item, it's a Wikidata items. So that will be another way, and we are exploring these opportunities.
Great, and I can see that Cheng has also put in a link there, so I'll put that in the shared document. So no other questions. I wish we had a bit more time because I have lots of questions about the sort of feedback you got from the non-governmental and governmental users that had different requirements. I can't put it into the Q&A because I'm a panelist, so maybe you could put something in the chat just for my curiosity. But to keep to time, I will now pass on to our next presenters and get the title up. So the next presentation is Plan S and Open Access by Repositories, Unity in Diversity. So we're joined for this presentation by Johan Rooryck and Sally Rumsey from Leiden University, Coalition S, Jisc. Over to you, I think, Johan, for screen sharing.
I'll first unmute myself and share the screen. Okay. Here we go. Thank you for inviting us. I will do the first half of the presentation and then Sally will take over. So as Sally said in a previous talk, Coalition S is a diverse group of 27 organizations worldwide, national European funders, the European Commission, a number of charitable foundations, primarily in the US. We also have a global dimension with the World Health Organization, South Africa, and the African Academy of Sciences. And we have participated in the Sao Paulo Statement of 2018, having coordinated action with OA 2020 as well, and with COA, as you can see today. The common goal, Sally already said it, all scholarly publications resulting from research funded by Coalition S organizations has to be published in full and immediate open access at the beginning of 21. So the various coalition members are implementing those measures going forward. Coalition S, of course, recognizes diversity of solutions to move to full and immediate open access. Diversity in the policies, not all funders have exactly the same policies. Diversity also in open access publishing solutions, avoiding monopolization. and the diversity of geographical, financial, cultural conditions in this context, of course. We also have a diversity, very importantly, in the preferences for routes to open access. Some of our funders place a priority on the repository routes to open access for AAMs, and others have a preference to pay for the version of record, the version of record in open access. And we accommodate such differences. We encourage diversity of business models on open access, then varying from paying for an APC to publish and read deals, subscribe to open deals, and collaborative non-commercial publishing models known as diamond models, of which we have recently published a study. Now, we recognize and welcome the diversity of publishers in size and scope, and we believe that the transitions of small publishers to open access is just as important as major publishers. We also commissioned a study about that came out yesterday, the SPA Ops follow-up. This, of course, all underpins the primacy of author choice and publish over. We think that author choice is very important. Our authors have to be able to publish where they choose, but it has to be in open access, and that's why we have these various routes towards open access. Publisher diversity, we believe it leads to journal diversity and implies author choice. So this ensures that authors retain the freedom to choose their publishing venue while meeting open access conditions. Researchers should have that opportunity to select the journal of their choice. And then, of course, that choice of the researcher will then determine what they need to do in order to make that paper open access. That is why we have launched rights retention strategy. There's also, this is the implementation roadmap, which shows that how Coalition S funders will implement their policy and as of which date. So you can choose, you can consult that. We also have diversity in the roads to compliance. So open access, if authors wish to publish in an open access journal, then Coalition S funders will financially support publication for fees for author, or at least some Coalition S funders will do that. The green route is for subscription journals. When author publish in that subscription journal, then they must make the version, either the version of record or the AM available in a repository using the rights retention strategy. And we will not pay for those because we do not want to pay for hybrid open access journals. Finally, there's a transformative route for hybrid and subscription journals where authors publish in a journal with a transformative arrangement. So that means that when there is a deal in place that authors in that specific jurisdiction of a library consortium can publish open access, then of course we will see that as an open access publication. Coalition S funders may or may not contribute to these open access initiatives and the transformative agreements, but note that most of the time these transformative deals are supported financially by the libraries, of course. So that is not something that most of the time we as funders have anything to do with. Now, of course, the diversity of policies has to meet that journal diversity, and authors need to be able to see how their journal of choice meets their Plan S funded away policy. An author cannot know how their set of favorite journals complies with Plan S policy. So that's why we developed a journal checker tool. This journal checker tool is basically a search engine that allows you to type in funder, journal name and institution, and outcomes then an advice, a piece of advice, allowing the researcher to see how that specific journal complies with the Plan S policy, whether you need to pay an APC in that journal, whether that journal falls under a transformative agreement, whether it is a transformative journal, or whether you have to adopt the rights retention strategy and use the language that falls under that strategy. That is, the Jisc is online since November. You can check it out. We also have unity and diversity for repository deposit. As you can see, Horizon Europe wants you, for instance, to publish either the VOR or the AM. It doesn't matter. Anything you publish has to be in a repository. For the ANR, it's slightly different. They want the authors to deposit that AM in HAL which is the French national or repository. And with Wellcome, it's still different. All publications have to be deposited in PubMed Central. So we accommodate this type of diversity as long as it's in a repository. Every funder can decide which repository is their preference. We also have a diversity of standards. We cooperate with COAR to adopt high standards for repositories. We support the diversity innovation in this field and accept the norms of the repository community. And we have sought input from COAR for Plan S requirements. So a practical advice, for instance, that we drafted for the repositories to be Plan S compliant was drafted in consultation with COAR. I want to insist on that. And what is also very promising, I believe, is that Jisc is developing via Open Door a repository self-assessment feature that will enhance and strengthen, I believe, the quality of the repositories going forward. Sally, is this where I hand over to you? I don't remember.
Yes,
There you go.
So publishers offer valuable services, typesetting, copy editing, peer review administration, and so on. And Coalition S funders, as Johan has said, are willing to pay fair prices for those publication services. However, Coalition S strongly believes that payment for publication services does not entitle publishers to own the author's accepted manuscript, and ownership should remain with the author. So it's like paying a decorator to paint your house. It doesn't entitle that decorator to own your house after he's finished. So this simple and clear principle needs to be understood by funders, universities, and most importantly, by the authors themselves, who often end up giving away their own rights. Thanks, Johan. So to address this peculiarity, from the 1st of January 2021, Coalition S funders' grant agreements require that their beneficiaries retain sufficient intellectual property rights to comply with their open access obligations for immediate open access to scholarly publications. And this means no embargo. So although these are funder requirements, remember that retaining ownership of the accepted manuscript is a direct benefit to the author. It is not purely a box-ticking exercise. Let me say it again, the rights retention strategy benefits authors. So technically, Coalition S funders differ slightly in how they implement this, either by adopting a prior license or via prior obligation of the beneficiaries, but the result is the same. Thanks, Johan. So authors only need to follow two simple steps. Firstly, they use the standard language, and this is just an extension of the funder acknowledgement that authors should be using already. And secondly, they make their accepted manuscript available in a repository. Funders can be contacted by their grant holders or their libraries to investigate if there happens to be a disagreement with the publisher. It's really very simple, and as Professor Stephen Eaglin of Cambridge University described in his Rights Retention Strategy Primer, I rather like this, elegant. Thanks, Johan. Now, the benefits for authors themselves in applying the CC BY license on their accepted manuscript mean that they can seek publication in any journal that does not refuse their submission, whatever its open access options, and they can still fulfill their funders' requirements. But most importantly, they retain sufficient rights in their own work to use and distribute that work using whatever channel they choose, to whomever they choose, and when they choose. So you may have seen publishers' restrictions for an article in a journal published by a major publisher. I picked this up just the other day. Authors can share their accepted manuscript immediately via their personal homepage or blog. Hurrah! However, authors can only share that same accepted manuscript via their institutional repository if they put an embargo on it. Plus, if they want to share it via an academic network like ResearchGate, they also have to apply an embargo. Now, to me, this doesn't seem like the widest possible dissemination. It actually is restricting sharing. So as well as open access for coalition-funded, S-funded researchers, any author can choose to use the rights retention strategy-like wording if they wish. It's worth remembering that the law automatically grants copyright in the work This is the next slide, Johan. Yeah, it's worth remembering that the law automatically grants copyright in the work to authors, not to publishers. So small publishers, those that publish a small number of subscription journals, may find flipping to full open access something of a challenge, and they're unlikely to broker deals with national consortia. Accepting the rights retention strategy in their policies gives them an easy means to offer a Plan S compliant open access option. The rights retention strategy also places greater importance on institutional repositories, those important shop windows and curators of their institutional research treasures. Thanks, Johan. Now, sadly, some publishers are bewildering authors by making statements such as these. This journal does not allow accepted manuscripts to be made open access under the rights retention strategy. If you use RRS wording, we will ask you to sign a contract pledging you will respect our embargo, and choosing the green route means the work is under an embargo that is not compatible with your funder's policy. Now, the prior license under the rights retention strategy takes precedence over conflicting provisions in the publishing agreement where they have been given the appropriate notice. However, if an author specifically signs an agreement agreeing to an embargo period, they will be in breach of their grant conditions. The really disappointing thing is that despite knowing about the rights retention strategy since July 2020, and despite knowing that the submitting author has a prior agreement with their funder, some publishers are presenting authors with a publishing agreement that they know will conflict with that author's prior agreement with their funder. And Coalition S is really disappointed that respected publishers would even contemplate placing their authors in such an awkward position by encouraging them to choose between breaching their funder agreements or publishing agreements. Thanks, Johan. This first example is confusing. Coalition S authors can and should use the rights retention strategy when submitting. The publisher has the right to reject a paper on receipt because of the rights retention strategy prior license, but that should be made clear at the outset. Now, many publishers continue to refuse to provide clarity about their position regarding accepting submissions containing the RRS prior license, and this is causing confusion for authors. The second example has a clear response. An APC payment is never a condition for compliance with a Coalition S funder's policy. Where applicable, the funder will pay a fair price for APCs in journals that are Plan S compliant. Where that is not the case, the RRS suffices. Thank you. This first example is a particular horror. By agreeing to payments, say, for open access publication in a hybrid journal, the author is committing to pay themselves or committing their institution because the funder will not pay. Bear in mind, this has occurred in situations where the publisher again knows that the funder will not pay. The publisher may be open to discussion and waive the charge. Another option is to choose another journal that doesn't present this contractual agreement to pay. There is no evidence that immediate release of accepted manuscripts damages publishing, so the archive preprint server and publishers such as the Royal Society that permit immediate open access with no embargo indicate otherwise. And to stress, repositories are largely compliant with Plan S. And so coming towards the end, this talk has described the different funding organisations of Coalition S. It's pointed out the Coalition's preference for variety of publishers, publishing venues, publishing and payment models, routes to open access, and the recognition of different author locations. Now, by encouraging this diversity of approaches and solutions, Coalition S supports its aim to promote immediate open access under a public license. And such differences support the richness and many benefits of open access to scholarly publications for researchers, research, academic institutions, and the wider society. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sally, Johan. That was really interesting. I'd seen on Twitter some of the statements that a certain publisher had been making towards people who'd been trying to use the rights retention strategy. And it's interesting to see all the different messages they're getting from different publishers. I don't believe we have any questions. Oh wait, something's just popped up and it's a long one. I will try and summarize. So regarding rights remain with authors, some publishers require a copyright transfer even if the publication is then published under CC BY. What is your stand on that? Is that what you mean, that some publishers try to curtail authors' choice?
Sally,
You want to start there?
That one? You can see it in the Q&A, right, Sally?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. The license, applying the license comes under the copyright ownership, and Coalition S is very keen that authors do retain their own copyright. I mean, as we keep saying, these are the author's rights. You know, authors, retain your rights, use them, don't lose them. And so here, just looking at the question, yeah, I mean, we're encouraging all authors to retain their copyright, and as we've been saying here, sufficient rights by applying this rights retention strategy wording as they submit.
Well, I think what is important also
if the work is an open access work and it's published open access and it's been paid for and so on, that's fine. What we're talking about here is the accepted manuscript, and it's retaining the rights in that accepted manuscript. So authors have got the right to use that as they wish. You know, the published work, that can remain in the domain of the publisher. So if it's a subscription journal, yeah, the publisher can then put a paywall on it, and etc. But the author can then still use their own accepted manuscript. If it's published in a journal under a CC BY license as an open access version, well, of course, yes, then that's free to be distributed and used at publication. Johan.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that it's very important to understand that the CC BY, in fact, overrides any copyright transfer agreement, even if you have signed that. And the reason for that is that it was announced to the publisher upon submission. So the publisher has the right at submission to reject the article. But once they've taken it through the reviewing process, they have implicitly acknowledged the statement at the beginning of the article that the AAM arising from that submission will be CC BY. CC BY is a right that is inherent in the manuscript. It is attached to the manuscript in an inherent way, and it cannot be removed by a later copyright transfer agreement. That's very important to know. So it is in a sense also a limited right, because the author voluntarily limits it to the AM, as Sally has said. And that means that we leave the rights to the version of record to the publisher. I mean, we think that is an acceptable compromise. Obviously, the publishers think that is not the case. But it does give the author maximal rights on that AAM to reuse all the results, graphs, figures, tables. And I think that should be of interest to researchers who now have to ask for permission of the publishers to reuse any graph, table, or figure they use in their own manuscripts, which they have made themselves, which is an absurd situation, as we all know.
Thank you. Yes, I imagine researchers across the globe will be looking to see how this plays out, because if it succeeds, then I imagine everyone will be wanting to retain their author rights.
Yeah, I've been trying to disseminate that in my own community of linguistics actually just a few days ago. So it's spreading, I hope.
Yes, I hope so too. So we have come to time. It is now time for the next presentation session. I want to thank all the presenters and also the authors of the presentations today. They were diverse and extremely interesting, and I know I might be rewatching them at a later date on Zenodo. And now I'm going to hand over to Jessica, who will be moderating the next session. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.